Hey folks, Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation, back with another episode in our Elements series for triathlon. And this week I'm talking to you specifically about the rain and what it means to race in the rain. Rain is one of those variables on race day that can really make or break someone's experience. Not just leading up to the race, but even on race day itself. Even your spectators, their friends, or family, a rainy day is just kind of meh, not a great day. But at the end of the day, a half Ironman is still a half Ironman, wet or dry. Same with an Ironman. And it's really up to you to be able to handle the elements, be as successful as possible. So hopefully today I can give you some tips around what it means to be successful when racing in the rain as a triathlete, and hopefully put you back in control, which is ultimately what we want to do, so that you can make smart decisions that will impact your performance, keep you safe, and help you stay as fast as possible given the conditions. Okay, so rain sucks in general, just because like we're all like little kids on race day. You've been working so hard all year, and then on the day you can see it coming on the weather app. It's just going to be wet. It's going to be ugly. Meh. Is it really a big deal? On some level, no, because we're triathletes and we swim and we're wet when we basically start our day. So what do we care so much about the rain for? Well, there are some issues related to rain that can make life as a triathlete pretty uncomfortable. Not just sort of general like transition area stuff, but in terms of like safety on the bike, about braking, cornering, turning, descending, about safety with other folks, like other triathletes making bad decisions, about comfort on the run, like blisters, etc. Even something generic across the board like nutrition. Rain can affect all of these things. And anything that takes you away from your core focus of making all the right decisions can be a problem, a significant problem, a compounding problem on race day. So we're going to make sure we address all of those elements for you here in today's podcast. All right. So first and foremost, I'm not even going to talk about it in sort of swim, bike, run format as I did with wind. I'm going to talk about it sort of in important to least important for me. Okay. So first and foremost, the thing with rain is safety. So rain in the water, pretty negligible. Most people don't even notice if it's raining when they're swimming. It's fine, not an issue, unless of course there's lightning, in which case know where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to do in case there is one of those storms, right? That person waving a red flag at you isn't just trying to ask you out on a date. They want you to get out, right? Because of lightning, right? Okay. So dumb jokes aside, for me, the rain and safety really comes in on the bike. First and foremost, the easiest example would just be riding through puddles. That could be a 6-inch pothole with a nice puddle on top of it. You would not know. So in general, we want to avoid riding through puddles or big puddles, just like we would avoid driving our car through a ravine full of raging water, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So don't put yourself in that situation. Don't be in a scenario where you're concerned, right? Second pace is braking. So when you are on your race bike or you're racing, typically you're at higher speeds. Your ability to stop on a dime is somewhat compromised by the wetness of your rims, the wetness of the brake pads, etc. So you need to be able to anticipate further. So if we were talking bike lengths and I said you need to ride 5 bike lengths behind someone to be legal, you might need to be 7 or 8 bike lengths behind someone so that you're able to stop. And that becomes more and more important as the road situation, as the venue narrows. So if you're in a big wide open highway with a wide open shoulder, you got 6 feet of shoulder, you got 10 feet of lane, you got 16 feet and one rider-ish in front of you, that's easy to navigate. If you're in a back country road that's only 7 feet wide, no shoulder, just drops off or ditch to oncoming traffic on the other side, not closed, that's a very different scenario, and should definitely have your spidey sense tingling, as it were. So we want to allow more time to brake, okay? Second place, when I think about safety on the bike here, is turning, okay? So when we want to navigate or turn on our bicycle in the rain, we want to do all of our braking before we start turning, right? We want to brake when we're going straight, and we'll deal with turning when we get there. So we want to be very smart about separating those two elements. Secondly, when we're turning in the rain, we are turning our bike, not our body. So when it's dry and our tires have a great grip on the road, our body is essentially steering the bike. I can lay my body down, the bike will follow, and I zip around that turn. On a wet day, you can't just get your body off the center of mass because the tires aren't going to hold the road anymore. And so you have to be careful. So we are much more upright when we're turning, and it's much more about the bicycle turning and us staying on top of it than vice versa, okay? When I think about safety, for the bike, last piece I would bring up is just the lines on the road, crosswalks, white lines, yellow lines. Many cases, especially if they're freshly paved, they can be slick. So just like railroad tracks, you wouldn't want to be twisting on those. Don't twist or turn on well-painted areas on a wet race day ride, okay? From a run perspective, I think the biggest safety issue, visibility if the course isn't closed, but really it's about staying warm. You know, as the day goes on, especially those who are doing longer course triathlon, as the day goes on, your body's ability to generate heat because you're slowing down, your muscles are fatigued, decreases, and if you're wet, it's basically pulling the heat out of your body. So I'll talk a little bit about more of that in a minute, but generally speaking, the safety issue on the run is really more about your overall wellness and ability to continue performing at the consistent level than something that's more acute or incident, accident oriented. Okay, so on the nutrition side of things, this is where things get a little sneaky with rain. Like rain's a distraction from you to be eating, right? You want to eat, but you're like, I gotta start breaking now because it's turn. I'll eat when I get out of the turn. You get out of the turn, like now Ricky and Bobby and Tim, you're in front of me. I can't eat because I got to make sure that they're not going to do anything dumb. And so on. And so wet becomes a real big distraction. So if you're not comfortable with eating and drinking on your bike and you add rain in, you're far less comfortable. So you're going to have to figure out a system through which you can continue to stay on top of that plan, executed according to a time schedule. I often have seen athletes use a timer or recurring timer, or I personally have an auto lap function on my bike. So every 5 miles it auto laps for me. And so that's my reminder. That's anywhere from 15 to 18 minutes. I know I should be doing something. It kind of gets me out of the zoned in state where I'm totally locked in on making sure that I'm safe on my bike. It's really, really important, okay? Not to mention that when you're wet, you're typically cold when you're cycling because you're moist and now you're flying down the road. And so your core body temperature may like to be 98.6, but if we have you moving at 20 miles an hour and then we add this wicking factor, pulling the heat out of your body, you can get quite chilly quite quickly. And as a result, you don't want to eat or drink. You're not that hot. I don't think I'm sweating. I'm not even thirsty. I'll just open my mouth and just drink all this water that's around me. That couldn't be any further than the truth. You're still racing. You're still working. Assuming that you're still doing the effort that you've done in training, your body is still experiencing the same load. Ergo, it's still doing the same thing. You may not perceive it happening, but it is happening. And so we have to stay on top of that nutrition. You will not know it's a problem until it's too late to fix the problem. It'll be somewhere on the run and you'll say, oh man, I don't think I drank anything on the bike. We can't fix that. I can't fix 3 hours of biking, 6 hours of biking and no food, right? We can only do that in the moment. So really stay on top of that nutrition. And from a nutritional perspective, we have targets and goals for you in terms of nutrition using our nutrition plan. I recommend that you aim for those same targets, like no changes there. And we do recommend that you pee twice on the bike, right? Kind of standard knowledge. But I do expect that you'll probably want to pee more, just being wet and being gross, etc. I expect that to happen. So don't be concerned if you find yourself peeing a few more times than just twice. Since you're not maybe sweating out at the same rate, some of the fluids you are consuming may prove to be a little bit excessive, but your body handles that generally pretty well by having you go to the bathroom. So something for you to think about, okay? All right, so your clothing. What do you do for clothing when it's raining, right? Well, the swim, you just put on your wetsuit and your goggles. Like, hey, fine, right? On the bike, things are a little different. We want to be warm, but we don't want to be in a situation where we're jeopardizing our safety, right? So I've seen athletes racing in gigantic plastic bags with their arms punched through the sides and for their head as well. Not a good idea, not safe. It also sounds like someone's tearing a hole in the sky, which is no fun for anybody. So instead, we want to make good decisions with our gear, okay? So we want some kind of arm warmer. So, they're the neoprene sleeves that just kind of go, or spandex sleeves that just go from your wrist to your shoulder. Those are easy to roll up, put on in transition as you walk to your bike, from your transition back to your bike. If you don't have arm warmers, they're, fairly expensive, but nice. You can always buy a pair of tube socks at the local store and just cut off the toe, and then you can just jam your hand through that. Anything to kind of put a layer over your arms will be super helpful, right? If you have a bike vest, that's fantastic. That's something, because bike vests generally are snug or relatively snug. They have a zipper on them. They're cut off at the sleeve, so my arm is still outside. I can regulate my temperature with my arms and the arm coolers, or arm warmers, I should say. But the vest is just on my core, right? Sort of keeping the wind off of me when I'm moving and so on. That's great. Plus, it's got some pockets and other things like that are great. If it is chilly or you have super low body fat, you may want some gloves. If you don't have nice cycling gloves, you can use gardening gloves. Again, something to keep the wind off of your hands and the extremities where they get cold like that. That can be important. As a side note, you will want to be able to see. So if you are a contact lens wearer or you have prescription lenses, whatever it is, you may want to have a backup system in place in your special needs bag, like an extra pair of contacts, or in your T2 bag, in case, you know, whatever got in your eyes or whatever your eyes were annoyed with on the bike, we're okay, right? If you are using lenses and you know it's going to be raining, I recommend using the RainX formula. That's Rain EX. It's a solution that you put on your glasses when they're dry, and basically when they do get wet, the water just beads off of your sunglasses, which is fantastic. So you're not stuck with kind of foggy, crappy glasses, which can also be a problem. And you got to take them off, and then your eyes aren't protected, etc. So if you know it's going to be that bad, I generally have a bottle of RainX that goes in my race box that I take with me to all my races anyway. So I've got that backup. Okay. All right. Time to talk a little bit about the run and the rain on race day. So I've talked a little bit about the heat stuff, but before we get to that, first and foremost, when you're running, the number one thing you want to do is keep the rain out of your eyes. It can drive you insane. And really just make running uncomfortable. So having a hat or a visor makes a big difference. So I almost have a hat or visor always on race day, whether it's for the sun, for managing ice, or for keeping the sun out of my eyes, or keeping the rain out of my eyes. It's all really, really important, okay? Those arm warmers you had on the bike, you may want to keep them on the run. Depending on what's happened with the day, the temperature, or the weather, if it's stayed cool, it hasn't warmed up, you may want to keep those arm warmers on. Maybe even the vest, like no issues there, right? You're not going to overheat. You got the ability to use your zippers on the vest, and you can always roll up those sleeves up and down. Super easy for you to kind of keep yourself regulated and cool as you go, right? Which is really important. The only option I would sort of add to the mix is like a potential base layer, like another technical long sleeve or some kind of technical short sleeve, that later in the day, if the rain does let up, sometimes after it rains in the summer when you're racing, it gets warmer, the humidity ranks up. But since you're wet and soggy, not moving that fast anymore, you can still stay really cool. Having some dry clothes can make a big difference. So putting those in one of your transition bags or your special needs bags with the top tied off can be great, right? That's easy. Some people like to use backup socks. I'm not a big fan of backup socks, so my shoes will still be wet, but some people are all about that. I totally let them decide what they want. Okay, so equipment. What do we do with our race equipment before the rain? We don't need to make any fundamental changes like we might for, say, a windy setup or a windy course, but we can take care of our bike beforehand. So we definitely want to clean the drivetrain, clean the chain, the cassettes, everything, make sure all the gunk is out of there. A nice new coat of lube will be great and keep your chain running happily regardless of the weather and the moisture and any sort of new dirt that pops up on the race itself. I recommend having some ability to keep your stuff dry inside your transition bag. So it depends where your transition bags are hung. If they're outside, some people they cut a hole in the bottom of a cup and put the string through there and leave the cup over the top of their bag. So the top of the bag is closed with the strings, but rain can't get in there. Some people tie the top of their bag off, but then it's kind of hard to open. I typically will put my stuff in the bag and put some of the stuff in a Ziploc bag so that stays dry. I try and mitigate the cost of having my items left outside. Having a wet bike seat's one thing, having a wet everything is another, and we don't need that necessarily, right? You may want to have extra lube or extra body glide because there's a very high possibility you may chafe with your kit moving more throughout the course of the day. So on a wet day, I do take a little extra time, make sure that my arms here are underneath my armpits are lubed up, or my elbows even, the top of my shorts, which normally are fine, but when they get wet, they may move a bit. Just anything to kind of reduce that ongoing discomfort, which eventually will sort of get inside your head, right? Finally, execution on a rainy day, it doesn't really change very much. Like I still expect you to push the same effort, swim, bike, and run. I still expect you to push the same watts. I expect you to have close to the same result. The only caveat being that there's just a higher focus on safety. We want to give you room to be safe. And in those scenarios, we just want to make sure that you're not chasing a time goal in a situation when you really should be thinking safety first instead of speed. So if you end up being a couple minutes slower because it was a wet day and you had to play it safe, that's fine. If you had to be a couple minutes slower because it was a wet day and you picked a crappy place in transition and all your stuff's underwater, or you fell in transition, or you mistakenly didn't tie off your bag and you had 500-pound sneakers, those are mistakes that we can avoid, and we can do those now. Of course, those of you on the team had the benefit of talking to your teammates and getting tips and tricks on the shortcuts for dealing with rain on race day and keeping things as dry as possible and making smart decisions. But everyone else, I recommend you talk to your teammates, your training partners, people in your area, other folks who can help you out. Racing in the rain is not necessarily rocket science, but a couple wrong decisions can really take a decent day and make it a crummy one. So anything you do to offset that would be super important. At the end of the day, mental toughness becomes the most important part of the day. You're toughing it out through the swim, bike, and run. And if that's something you can practice in your training, if it's wet outside and you're supposed to go for a run and you don't want to, maybe once or twice a year you do that run. Just so you're like, I can run in the rain, I don't die. If it happens on race day, I'm all set. Same with the rain. I can ride my bike in the rain, I won't die, it's okay, right? Like as long as you feel safe out there, put yourself in those situations so that when the X factor comes up on race day, it's just another thing you do. You know how to handle it. You're all set. You can be a professional when everyone else is freaking out, and that composure will ultimately lead to a better placing overall and a better race experience. This has been Coach Patrick from Endurance Nation. I want to thank you guys for tuning in for another Elements podcast. Today we discussed the rain. Last time we discussed the wind. Coming up, I'm discussing other things. Hold on, please, for a second. I'll be discussing heat, and I'll also be discussing darkness, and not combined. We'll keep them separate, and give you some more tips on those elements. If you like these podcasts and these videos on our YouTube channel, please let us know in the comments below. Please share it with a friend. Find someone who needs this tip, needs this help. Let them know Endurance Nation is here. We've got lots of great resources for them to help them out. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys online or at the races. Take it easy, everyone.